Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Marvel Movie Talk on the Bladtcast Entertainment Network. Yeah, that's right. It's an entire entertainment network now. I am Christian Bladt, excited for another chat about Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever. Joined as so often on these Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern by the one, the only Mr. Eric Connor.
Good evening to
That's
none
all
of
you
you.
got. That's really that. You want to? Should we cut and take it again? You have a
No,
better
no, no.
greeting for the
I don't
people?
know. If
No.
I said Wakanda Forever, it'd be a little
No, see
obvious.
that. You know what? I'm glad you said good evening, even though it's 11
You're
a.m.
very, very mad.
Very excited to get a chance to chat again with my pal from the heyday of AfterBuzz TV, Mr. Phil Svitek. I almost called you Svil Svitek, but Phil
good.
Svitek, who I mean, we talked about a lot of things over there, but we really delved into South Park more than anything else, didn't we?
We did, absolutely. And I just want to say good night. You know, we cover every part of the day.
Oh, and then we'll see if Khalil wants dibs on good afternoon or if he has anything else. What I can always say about Phil Svitek, he's got integrity. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And for the first time, filling in for our pal Nate Miller, who unfortunately he texted me this morning. He said I have no voice. And I said, what's the problem? But I guess that's not good for podcasting. So hopefully we'll be able to have Nate on one of our subsequent episodes. But Khalil Bobo, thank you so much for being on today and talking Black Panther with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited.
The voice of the voiceless.
Yeah. Thanks for having a voice. You know, that's really what the prerequisite is to be on this show. As our guest, as our last minute addition, Khalil, and perhaps for a little bit too much of an obvious reason, but I do want to start with you. I want to get your thoughts. I have no idea what any of the three, I know a little bit what Phil thinks about Black Panther because I saw an Instagram post, but I don't really know what people thought about it. But Khalil, I didn't even follow you on Twitter until like 20 minutes ago. So I definitely don't know what you thought. So I want to start clean slate. What did you think? What were your expectations going into Black Panther 2? And what did you think of the film itself?
Expectations wise, I thought I was looking forward to an explanation for Chadwick, obviously. And I kind of expected it to be just as amazing as the first time. Now after having seen the movie, it exceeded my expectations. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was a great tribute to Chadwick. I thought it was very well executed. Like we basically focused on grief, and yeah, I just thought it was great. And it was, for it to be, superhero Marvel movie, it was like, okay, we did something different than the new bad guy beam in the sky thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that the high points of the movie for me were everything that you checked off. When we did our first conversation about this, I was talking about how I had sort of, before the movie was close to even opening, there was a part of me that sort of felt, did they really have to not recast him? When, it's such a great character. He has such a rich history in the comic books, T'Challa himself. And, the movie, I think the biggest thing it accomplished for me personally was, yeah, I think it was better that they didn't. I think that the mantle of Black Panther being something that can be passed, look, there are characters I think you would have to recast, but this was like, no, we can really explain it away. And I think that this movie was able to touch on all the things he said and so much more. Phil Svitek, your thoughts, expectations going in, and your actual thoughts on the film.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine the massive weight. I mean, it's a Marvel movie to begin with, right? So there's a lot of expectation for that, and obviously the weight of, just the culture and everything like that. Like, so the pressure that everyone must have been under, I can't imagine, right? And I thought overall they executed it really well. I am very sad to not have Chadwick be both in the movie and also in our world. And I imagine that they would have done this regardless, but I love the expansion of the world. That to me was the most exciting, because I think the first one was great, but it hit kind of various tropes we've seen perhaps in other stuff. And not that it made it a bad movie by any stretch, like it was still very well executed, but I really loved exploring the different facets of this world, right? And that to me was the most exciting part of it. And especially like, just the Afrofuturism aspect of it all, and deep diving further and the different cultures, right? And exploring places we've quite literally never been, like with Atlantis, and I feel sorry for Aquaman too, because now it has to live up to this.
And it has Amber Heard in it, so it's two big strikes against it. But Eric Connor, let us know just sort of big picture, and then we'll kind of work our way. We'll basically Russian doll, we'll Matryoshka doll this. We'll start out with the big one, and then we'll work our way down to the teeny tiny one. What are your overall thoughts on Black Panther 2?
Yeah, I think you hit it right, guys. It's like the weight of this thing. Like, could you imagine if they did this badly? Like, if they screwed this up, like the pressure that cast must have felt, the pressure felt by Ryan Coogler. I mean, I can barely fathom it, because as you were saying, right, it's like so hard already to do a good Marvel film, considering like Marvel far more than not has really hit it out of the park, and even at their worst, it's still a pretty solid single or a double. But with this one, on top of everything else, on top of how do you live up to the giant shadow cast by Black Panther, which is the only one still that's been nominated for an Oscar, how do you then, on top of that, honor Chadwick Boseman, who we talked about this when he passed, that he also, like, the world of baseball recognized him, for playing Jackie Robinson. Like,
I mean, that 42 movie, and I forget the name of the one where he's James Brown, but those two movies were both, Get On Up. Those were both like early in his career, and you're like, this guy's amazing. And then I was so excited with like, wait, that guy's gonna be Black Panther. I agree. It like transcended just, oh, he's that guy from the superhero movie.
Well, and I think in some ways it's hard to look at this as just a movie on that end, and there were some things that I suppose I'd call it nitpicking in terms of storytelling and some of the writing, but I mean, overall, like, I see this with my wife, with my friend Lou, who's my movie wife, and my kids, and I'm so glad they have this movie. I'm so glad they saw this in the theater. And I'll tell you, that opening of the Marvel logo with just Chadwick Boseman, holy crap, that like knocked us. Because weirdly enough, the scene preceding that didn't quite do it for me. But that moment of silence,
it was so quiet.
Yeah,
it was so quiet.
Yeah, that's true. You could have heard everyone in the theater I was in, power down their cell phone, because they realized, like, oh yeah, this is a serious moment. In the live chat, Dominicus Saxon, I like the silent homage with the Marvel splash page, and they had T'Challa pass away the same way that Boseman did. Yeah, they didn't have some mission gone awry, and
I love that. Yeah, I watched it and I was like, oh, duh. The answer was right in our face the whole time. That's okay.
Yeah, and just the idea that if and Shuri's grief, not just that her brother died, that I'm so smart, I'm pretty sure I could have helped him if he'd asked. And I mean, there's sort of that moment when she finally is able to synthesize the plant later in the movie. It's like, oh yeah, this is how much time you needed. If you had this much time, you could have saved your brother in some way. And it's basically this idea of the grief we've all kind of touched on, and just the fact that she's like not ready to deal with it, and just sort of watching it happen in real time. I thought that that Letitia Wright has been great every time she's been Shuri, but I mean, she really got was front and center in this movie in the best way. Yeah.
I also love that they didn't say what the illness was, out of respect for him and everything. I thought that was like very tastefully done.
I
Yeah,
don't know. I
because
don't know if
instead of
any-
sorry, yeah, because they could have, assigned a real world one. What would have been worse is, and he got that space virus, when we went to some planet that we never saw it just would have been like yikes. What were you gonna say, Eric?
Well, now you're making me think of I think it was space dementia from Armageddon that Steve Buscemi got. That I would have been okay with, but weirdly enough,
I also think Steve Buscemi had that in Boardwalk Empire. But anyway, go ahead.
he has that in almost every role. I think weirdly enough, Glee. Yes, stay with me for one sec. Glee actually had to deal with this too when Corey Monteith passed away,
Sure.
and the way they handled it there, same thing. They actually did an episode all about it, and they didn't say how he died. And I think that's kind of the smart way to go about it. And I hear they said it was a disease, but right, not naming it. And really kind of, it was a pretty bold choice, by the way, starting us mid conflict, mid tragedy as it was unfolding. And we all know how that's going to end. But I was like, wow, they really they realized they couldn't turn from it. So finding a whole way of telling a story. I mean, of all these Marvel movies, you think we've seen it all. Nope. To do a 2-hour, 40-minute movie really about grief, rebuilding, and mourning. I mean, that's not a typical comic book fare by any stretch. So, yeah, I think they realized that was the only way to do it and to do it justice and do it well, and also be able to make it. And the dog agrees.
I mean, that's the important part.
And the other thing that is, kind of bittersweet about that is it really does fit kind of well into the MCU as far as, we've coming out of Endgame, coming out of Phase 4, going into Phase 5, and we've got a new slate of heroes. And so it's kind of, like you say, grief and a rebuilding of sorts. So it's unfortunate, but it fits at the same time.
Yeah, I think for me, the aspect of her in particular being if only I had known, I thought was a clever touch, because I think there's a lot of, people and discussion in the real world of could anything have been done, right? Because he was so secretive about this to the point that even Marvel didn't know, a lot of people didn't know there. And so I thought that was a good reflection just in general of the whole situation, because it allowed us to be an audience surrogate and, I don't know, for me, more easily connect with Shuri and kind of be like, okay, this is her story now because she's me.
Yeah, I think that in a lot of ways, she sort of helps the audience deal with it. But, we've sort of touched on this idea of what this must have been like, not just for Ryan Coogler, but, the cast and the crew and everyone who had worked with him, not just on Black Panther 1. I mean, he popped up in a number of, both the Infinity War movies and so on. And of course, Civil War. So, I mean, they'd really spent a lot of time with this guy. And I think to have another actor step in, no matter how great that actor would have been, would have probably been too much, and it wouldn't have been dealing with it. It's like they really have to acknowledge that it happened. And yeah, you touched on it, and you don't get this a lot in film series. You get it more in television series. Like John Ritter passes away, but they continue doing 8 Simple Rules, and Red Fox died for a show that was wildly successful, and then they replaced him with Jack A.
For a heart attack at that.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, I know. After all those
that's
times,
the only way he could go. Let's be honest. No other way would make sense.
Yeah, no. Red Fox went doing what he loved, grabbing his chest and saying, "Elizabeth, they're coming."
Seeing Elizabeth.
Yeah, but it's and yeah, I mean, and it's also I don't know. I mean, it's so my kids are still too small to have seen these movies. They've seen these characters in animated form. So there isn't sort of, but I think for a little bit older kids, acknowledging the fact that this guy died, maybe in their own, hopefully in their personal life, they haven't lost anyone. So, to just deal with the reality of it, I think it was a really good choice. There's people that I follow on Twitter, some people who sometimes have watched various iterations of this show who were gung-ho for this idea of why don't you just recast him? I think a lot of people have at least come around to, I still would like to see that character, but I understand why they didn't. And, we can talk a little bit more about the Black Panther that we did get. I mean, I think the scenes with Letitia Wright as Black Panther, I think were, look, as soon as you see the trailer, who's in that suit. It's there wasn't really any doubt. It's like, okay, that's not M'Baku.
I had a theory it was going to be Winston Duke in a special girdle, which I was very sad they didn't go with.
That's Black Panther 3. All right, so you're gonna have to wait.
It's a straight to VHS version of Black Panther, I think.
Yeah, but and just sort of the way she has to deal with her grief, first about her brother, then about her mother. I thought a really, like, the legitimate surprise in the movie, the most significant one, was when we saw Killmonger, and I thought that was such a great way to be like, we want you to know where she's at. Why this is the person that she sees. Khalil, what did you think about getting to see Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger in that sequence?
Great surprise. I was not, in my mind, he was dead. So it was like, all right, we're not going to see him. So it was a great surprise. It made sense as far as, where she was internally with everything that was going on. And I feel like, in a lot of ways, the big bad in this movie was, her internal grief struggle. Like, Namor, what didn't really feel like the villain to me. So that was great that we got Killmonger to come and kind of drive that home about, like, what she's dealing with, because that, in my eyes, that was the big bad for this movie.
Yeah, I mean, Namor has, I use this example all the time. In fact, I'll already referenced it in relation to this movie, but your best adversaries, your best big bad, your best villain is somebody that you have a starting point where you understand completely where they're coming from and you probably agree with them. Killmonger, right up to a point. Even Thanos, right up until a point. It's a lot quicker when you start to go like, whoa, okay, Thanos, that's a bit crazy. But it's getting to know Namor in the way we did, that time that Shuri spends with him, you really get to understand him. You understand it. And then he's like, yeah, and then we're going to enslave the surface world. Whoa, all right, slow down, buddy. All right. You had us, like, we were good. And then, you went a few steps ahead. Eric, give me your thoughts in terms of watching, Shuri, one, deal with the grief, but then also the anger and how to take on this mantle of Black Panther.
Yeah, I think having Killmonger show up when they did was smart too. It was like we needed to sort of put a face on that angle, that idea of like, okay, well, maybe revenge is the solution, rage is the solution. And if anyone else had said it to her, it wouldn't land in the same way. And also, by the way, I mean, Michael B. Jordan, man, he shows up, you're like, oh God, that guy's good.
No, Michael B. Jordan is so good.
Yeah.
That Fantastic Four movie was almost watchable. I mean, it still wasn't, but it was so much closer.
If you only looked at him and
that's true.
It's a fine film. And then, but the problem is there's all these other scenes he's not in.
Yeah.
Or there's other parts of the frame you have to look at that he's not in. He was so great in that role, though. And so, yeah, him coming back, there was applause. I mean, that which was also kind of funny. Like, the big bad from the first movie shows up again, and people are thrilled to see him. And I think that it was a smart way of doing it. I think what's tricky is I found so many of the supporting characters, their voices popped a lot more than hers, and I don't think it's necessarily about Letitia Wright. I think she's a really good actress. She was very good, even in was she in the Death on the Nile, one of those movies? She was great in that, But I think like the writing of her was so much about her trying to take in what to do. It was almost like she was on a pause button for a lot of the film, enabling all these other characters to really pop, and especially Namor and Winston Duke, by the way. I would love, Girdle or not, I would love to see him have his own sort of thing, be it a TV series.
Love him.
In the Wakanda universe. He showed up, and the second he showed up, I turned to my buddy and I was like, where's his movie? Because like he just owns that screen when he's on it. And again, I think the writing, again, all the acting is great, but I think the writing of the supporting characters, they just pop more because they just had that energy. They weren't sort of trying to figure out what to do, but rather they were doing their best thing. And and eventually she gets there, but it took her the whole movie. So it's kind of a tough thing to play, kind of a tough thing to write. The payoff is quite good, but really Namor, you were totally right about that, Christian. He's interesting, and I love how he approached it.
Yeah, we'll talk about him in a moment.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm sure that Kevin Feige can tell you exactly the date that the M'Baku, 8-part Disney Plus series will premiere. It's probably 2025, but he knows the date. Like, it's already there, and
I'm here for it.
I'm there for it.
Yeah.
Phil, sort of the same thing. Sort of watching Shuri where she's at the very beginning of the movie, once she finds out that her brother's passed away, and just sort of where we go with her, from a storytelling standpoint over the 2 hours and 40 minutes of this film.
Yeah, I mean, I love that journey of anger, right? What you sort of do. I mean, I think her journey is a reflection of Namor, and I don't look at him as a villain. He's just an antagonist, right? And I think the similarities between them, are very deliberate, right? And their true villain is colonization, and I think deliberately they get caught up in an internal fight amongst themselves when, again, really they should be. Was it France that was the main sort of like culprit of all of this? That was like trying to steal the vibranium.
The U.S. was doing it too, but yeah, France got caught.
Easy target.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, somebody pointed out that one of those French mercenaries was Batroc. I did not recognize him, but from past MCU films, in comic books known as Batroc the Leaper, which is, let's just be glad that he's just Batroc in these. I was like, I don't watch these movies often enough that he jumped out at me. But yeah, so yeah, Phil, the sort of the big point, the vibranium being sort of the metaphor for basically just colonization in general,
Yeah, exactly. And, the colonizers not being happy that they're not number one ultimately, and the discovery of that and how it messes with them. So, yeah, I liked all the subtext of all of it. And, yeah, Shuri having to, I mean, it's very apropos that, like, her last final thing is to, have that ceremony and think about her big brother, because she just essentially avoided that for, not only just this movie, but like the time in between, like we get a cut scene, right? We get the death scene, but then a year passes and, she hasn't dealt with it for a year. And so she's finally able to do that and start to process all of this. And I think, it's a very emotional journey for sure.
Yeah, I think that was a good choice from a story standpoint to, have that much passage of time. And then the fact that she hasn't been able to deal with it. I didn't want to say that she hasn't moved on. She just hasn't even figured out a way to comprehend it. I think it speaks, volumes to it. And, they're in this situation where they don't have a Black Panther because of the events of the first movie. So that sort of puts them in an interesting predicament. I do want to talk about Namor. He's come up a couple of times. And what I had said to people, look, of course, anytime that you take a character who appears one way in their initial incarnation, and then they seem different, they're like, right away, there's always this little contingent that's like, oh my God, I don't like what they did to him. But I have never found the character of Namor very interesting. He's Mr. Spock with winged feet, and the winged feet don't add, because Mr. Spock is a way more interesting character than Namor. He's always trying to steal Reed Richards' girlfriend, and I'm like, ew, I thought he was great in this, in another movie, he would have been the best part of it, but I don't know. I just thought he was a revelation. What did you think, Khalil?
Yeah, I agree. I've never been a fan of Namor. Like, he was always someone that just existed to me. As far as the Marvel universes go, I don't care. Yeah, and I feel this way about a lot of the MCU movies. They do a good job of making you care about the characters you did not care about prior to the movie. But yeah, Namor was great. I love the addition of the Mayan and Hispanic culture that they threw in there. I thought it was beautiful. I loved it.
Yeah, I think that it just makes it so much more interesting, that he's hundreds of years old. It's tied to that mythology, and you're able to really just bring different representation to the table.
Yeah.
We were making some old TV references earlier. Dominicus Saxon one ups us. I'm just glad that Tenoch Huerta did a better job as Namor than Patrick Duffy did. Patrick Duffy, of course, did not actually play the Submariner, but there was a series in I think the late 70s that was very similar to this. But yeah, I don't know. I don't understand. You can't make the argument that well, they went and ruined Namor. It's like, no, I mean
They
he just
finally
is,
made him interesting. That's what they
yeah,
did.
I mean, Namor Rita is probably more interesting than he is, because she has to deal with living in his shadow. What did you think just about the portrayal, Eric, of Namor, but then also just sort of the not just the on screen, but just sort of the building of this character, this version of the character?
Well, him and Aquaman both, like, they kind of have the work cut out for them in
Now,
terms
do
of,
you
like,
mean Vinny Chase Aquaman from Entourage, or are you
or is there
talking?
any other? That's the only one I know of.
Right. Okay. Good. No. Look, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
stopped there in my mind.
There is no Jason Momoa in my world.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's like, right, in some ways you almost have to do the apology. Like, okay, we're not going to put him in his like little what we call in Yiddish his gakas, his skivvies,
Is that what they call that?
the gakas. That means like your underwear. Yeah, it's a good word. We're not going
I
to
like
do
it.
that. We're not going to give Jason Momoa an orange shirt and tight green pants, although I think he probably could pull it off.
I
And so
mean, yeah. You
well,
want to talk about burying the lead, though. Put a shirt on Jason Momoa.
yeah, about to say, right.
Well, they did at the end of the movie. He had
Yeah, that's
the
true.
comic book accurate costume.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I
I
think
thought it
what
was
they
cool.
did here that was so smart is they really, I think, distanced themselves in a lot of ways from Aquaman, both in terms of the storytelling, the design. Like they made their version of an underwater kingdom really look like, in essence, like a village, that just happened to be underwater. And so I thought that was actually pretty smart. But I loved how they really linked, the culture with Mayan culture, and also found this really interesting crossover with, in essence, Wakanda. And the idea, like, we're really similar. Like, our journeys are basically the same. People are always trying to take what we have. And I thought that was a really smart way to do it. And it set up a really good tension and maybe a partnership down the road. But they've also set him up that at any point, he could easily be swayed. I mean, it's like when those times when Magneto in the comic would be a good guy, it was always like, the heel turn inevitably, like, always seemed to follow the babyface turn. So I think they did a great job with him, and I'm excited to see where he pops up next. I mean, it could be
Yeah,
Secret Wars, it could be sooner.
With Magneto, you always knew when he breaks out the helmet, that's when it's like,
Yep.
that's like, yeah. Phil, your sense of Namor. Actually, let me bring in this comment from Ivan Soto. As a Hispanic, I'm glad he brought a lot of depth. I definitely didn't expect his name to be literal without love. I thought that was a nice touch. Him, but then also creating basically an underwater Wakanda, just sort of showing that to us. I thought, I usually feel like IMAX is a bit of a scam to get me to spend, $6 more, but I was very glad that I saw all of that, on the biggest screen possible. What'd you think, Phil?
Yeah, it was really fantastic. I mean, I have to commend, I think overall, Black Panther, the first one, and now this one, could really be standalone movies. I mean, sure, watching like the Infinity War and Endgame certainly helps fill it out. And obviously the other ones, but I think overall they're very solid in terms of being self-contained in a way that most Marvel movies aren't. And so in that same respect, the introduction of him, and I love the siren calls in general, the way they attack that ship, and we don't quite know, and we're still kind of reeling from the loss, and then we're kind of introduced to this, and we're kind of wondering, wait, are they from Wakanda? And then we're like, oh, it's not Wakanda because it's not, once the reveal happens of, who they are, and getting, like, I thought we got to know a lot of the motivations and the culture, and just basically, as pointed out, the depth of everything in a very short amount of time, right? And I thought, I didn't know much about him beforehand, and certainly, we've made the comparison to Aquaman, and, you can think of Atlantis, but I thought they didn't use a lot of shortcuts. Like, they really filled in the gaps in ways that you needed to, and I respected that.
Yeah, and so something that we touched on for a moment, Kemi Egan directly says, "When do you think we could see Namor again?" And I think that some of these big event movies, I think, will impact the surface world, the undersea world, and the hidden world of Wakanda. So I think we would see him in one of the big event movies. Like Eric said, maybe it's Secret Wars, maybe it's something else. I don't think that the films that have been announced, Quantumania or the Marvels,
Definitely
I don't.
Fantastic Four, but they gotta get Doom in there too. So
Yeah. And you gotta get a Fantastic Four. I'm in no rush for that movie because they seem to be taking their time. And people
same.
were like, we don't have a casting announcement, and people were upset. I'm like, no, take your time to cast.
We got to let the wound heal from the previous
Yeah.
Four.
Yeah.
You want to just go back in, you get a lot of scar tissue.
Right, exactly. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see when we get him again. I mean, there will be more Black Panther stories. I like that they're tied together. Sort of that moment where we see that Shuri could have killed him, and then I think for storytelling and for universe building, I think it's much better that she didn't. That she came to that moment. And there's sort of this seeming agreement, but then of course there's that moment at the end where it's like, yeah, but they're going to come around. They're going to see how bad these surface people are, and so I'm interested in seeing more of the character. And very rarely, in the '90s, the Submariner had his own comic book, and at the end of each issue, I wasn't like, man, I can't wait for next month. Very rarely am I excited for that character. And I think that they did a great job. And I don't know. I thought it was very interesting, all across the board. So there's all of that stuff that we deal with. But then also, there's, this film has some great representation that we talked about. Obviously, it's a Black Panther film. And then, of course, we get this new character that's brought here. But then for some of us, we need white people to, to have. Look, I like Martin Freeman a lot. Boy, he didn't need to be in this movie, did he? But it's like he's in the other one, and I always like him. And this graphic, Eric, take a bow. Are you proud of yourself here?
Exceedingly, because I think this is the next great, Marvel Disney show. It's going to be like heart to heart. They hate each other. They love each other.
Because when they got together, it was murder. My Funny Valentina, for our audio listeners, it's a graphic. And I don't know how much this added to this story, but clearly they wanted to set up Thunderbolts. They wanted to deal with all of this. And I think that it can be very clunky. I don't think necessarily it was. We'll talk about Riri in a moment. I think introducing these other things, I think they made it work in the confines of the story. I don't know that we needed him, but I kind of enjoyed this dynamic for the most part. I don't know, Phil, what did you think about bringing these characters into this specific story?
For me, I could take it or leave it, but I did enjoy that side of it, that it added scale to all of it, right? Because we had the UN sort of meeting, and so obviously that ties into the larger context. And these people are essentially representative of the U.S., the U.S. government, and so forth. And I don't know. I love that sort of spy aspect of it. He's thinking that he goes behind her back, and then that sort of funny moment of like, I knew what you were doing the whole time. So yeah, I mean, it does certainly add runtime to it, but I don't know. I never found that the movie dragged or anything like that. So I don't know. I didn't have as much issue with it as seemingly other people perhaps did.
Yeah. What do you think, Khalil? You seem to agree with this idea of how tough it can be when you're, I don't know what this is, movie 26, and you're like,
Right.
you're setting up the next 10 movies. So you still have to do a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I think that they did an okay job with it, but I agree with Phil. If they had decided we don't need these characters in the movie, I don't think everybody's like, yeah, but where's Martin Freeman?
Right. Yeah. No, I wouldn't have remembered if they weren't there. I'm going to, amen you and Phil's comments. I would not have noticed, but, I love the MCU. I love everything they're doing over there. So I understood like, oh, this is for the Thunderbolts. Cool. All right. That's why we're here. So, I was fine with it.
Yeah. And Ivan points out Julie Louis-Dreyfus being CIA is scary. She's beyond dirty. I mean, I think, I think if you're going to be in the CIA business, you're going to have to break some eggs. I think that makes perfect sense. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting casting to have her as we've seen Valentina along the way. And
I'm a fan of.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think whenever the people that they've added, like we know they're adding Harrison Ford to take over Thunderbolt Ross, we're getting some of these additions. It's like, oh yeah, no, these are. She's not. I don't know. I mean, she's been in TV for so long in such iconic roles, Seinfeld and Veep. Not to mention her turn on SNL that no one remembers, but I mean, she's been around for so long, and this is I think she's great for this character, this very duplicitous, and the bomb that really wasn't a big bomb, but the idea that they had been married is kind of funny, to just think about that moment where either one of them thought that was a good idea. What are your thoughts, Eric, on getting your funny Valentina into this film?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect to see her. I thought we'd see him at some point, even if it was
Right.
just for like a throwaway scene. But I mean, I was perfectly happy to see her. The issue is it didn't fold in all that well. I thought like they didn't really pay it off. Yeah, she arrested him, but that was it. And then they broke him out, which I thought was nice. So, I guess he's gonna be hanging out in Wakanda now, which is fine with me too. But it did feel like a little bit of a bump because tonally it doesn't quite match the rest of the film. But that being said, I mean, I make this Photoshop, with the skills of a man who barely understands Photoshop. But the truth is, like, I would love this show. Like, I have to be honest, like, I don't know if it'll quite be an MCU type show, but the two of them together as exes forced to work together, like, she brings such a great energy to the MCU in the way that they've introduced her. Now, I don't know if this movie needed that energy per se, but I'm very excited to see Thunderbolts. I'm excited to see how they could use her. I mean, I feel like she's going to have to show up in Secret Invasion at some point too. So, there's definitely spots for her that make sense. I just don't know if this was it.
Right. Yeah. Well, obviously, where the key point of this film is setting up the next Black Panther. We have a female Black Panther. There, when this film starts, Wakanda doesn't have a king; it has a queen, and obviously there are some very strong female characters in this franchise, specifically Black Panther. I'm speaking of not the MCU in general, of course, but we've just with basically with all the characters that we've had, and I think that they were front and center here. And again, I wonder if we needed this to be the spot where they introduced Riri Williams, because we all know that she's getting a Disney Plus show. However, I loved getting to see her. I loved her dynamic with Shuri. And, I think that it also just sort of, has this idea of just all of these strong female characters. Her, this college student who invents this one-of-a-kind device, and she's, oh, by the way, she's also come up with, it's not stolen Tony Stark tech, No, she just invented it all herself. So I think it's a great character. I'm glad they introduced her. I love her Target ads where she's in character also, which I've noticed a lot since the movie. But give me your thoughts, Khalil, on bringing Riri into this movie. Whether she's essential or not, I enjoyed it, is really the end of the day.
Yeah, I was actually really excited for this part of the discussion because Riri was my favorite takeaway from the movie. But obviously, I enjoyed honoring Chad, and I liked the spin on Namor. But Riri was my like, she's the one. I'm very excited for this show now. I didn't, I don't, I've ever since she was like, created in the comics, I've been a fan, and I didn't exactly like love the suit. It felt like it felt clunky, kind of like a Gundam almost. But
Yeah.
as far as her in the movie, her character, everything, I was like, yep, I'm here for it. I love it. Sign me up. Can't wait for her show. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a great vantage point for how to, what they call for long running TV series, where you do the backdoor pilot, where an episode of a long running TV show is the actual pilot for a new show. And sometimes when you watch a show that was on for years, you watch it in reruns and syndication, you're like, what the hell is this episode? What is this episode of Who's the Boss, where Fran Drescher and her friend want to run a catering company? And that's a real backdoor pilot for a show that really didn't happen. But to put into this huge MCU movie, like, oh yeah, we're gonna have a show. Do you like her? Yeah, she's getting a show. Let's get to hang out with her for a while. There's no better way. There's no better spotlight that could have been shown on this character. What did you think, Phil, of getting to spend time with Riri Williams?
I liked her as the character, and I thought she brought a lot of dynamic. The interesting part was the idea that, they essentially had to kill her to stop everything, and it became like very binary as opposed to, I think there's a few other options perhaps. So
it did feel excessive. That felt very excessive.
Yeah. So this is the part that, like, as we go deeper, there's certainly parts I could nitpick, and this in particular, not her as the character, but her as
her purpose in the story.
Yeah, it's one of those things that this is where it's like, okay, maybe we could have fine-tuned it just a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a fair point. And yeah, there are little things, there's little pinpricks you can put throughout the movie for sure. What did you think of Riri, Eric?
Oh yeah, very similar note as Phil. I adored her. I agree. The whole idea, like, remind me to murder you later. It had that kind of feel, like, stay here and we might kill you, but we might not. Just relax, have a drink. That felt a little strange. You're right. It didn't. The stitching wasn't great there, but I thought, though, this, again, as much as I love Valentina, maybe didn't tonally quite fit. This fit quite nicely, though, tonally. Like, I agree, the plotting of it could have used some tighter stitching, but I found, I mean, she's wonderful. And like, it got me so excited for her show, which I wasn't necessarily super stoked about until I saw this movie. And now I'm like, yes. And I love that she, as similar thing I was talking about with a lot of the supporting characters. She showed up, and within like 2 seconds, like, all right, yes. Like, she brought such a specific energy to it. Really funny, really believable. Like, and I could see even like the way her mind worked. Like, it was funny seeing her kind of like immediately just get to Wakanda. It's like, oh yeah, I could do this. She's like totally on top of her game. And the idea of, by the way, a college set Marvel show is also exciting. Like, I hope it is set in Boston. I hope they take advantage of the fact that Boston, despite Spinal Tap, is a college town. And in essence, like let's see her dealing with her like full her alias kind of like, I'm a grad student, but I also have to help save the world. So I think, or undergrad, I guess, in her case. Either way, I think she was great. I think they really nailed the launch of that character. So Ironheart, I think, just got a huge shot of adrenaline, and all of a sudden, a lot of people don't know this character, don't know Ironheart, don't know Riri. They're on board immediately, and that's no small feat.
Yeah, and Dominique Thorne is the actress who plays Riri. Let's make sure that we give her credit. I thought that she was great. It's very interesting, and yeah, I think that this advent of having so much content to provide for Disney Plus leads to creating so many different kinds of shows. You know, I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about She-Hulk. It was a very different kind of show compared to even WandaVision, you know, I mean, which was the first one, you know, you follow all the way along. We've had some very different shows along the way. And I think, you know, seeing where her story continues, I agree with Khalil's point about the suit. I think that the suit that we get in the show, and honestly, it'll probably be like the first season's going to build to like, oh my God, look at the suit now. But you know, this idea that we didn't quite get it here, I think that they're definitely holding a little bit back. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I think it all worked, but I do agree it is a bit of a fault of the film that I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess because Namor's like 500 years old, he's very old school. He's like, well, we have to kill her. You know, it's like, you know, the idea that, you know, they come up with one solution. It's like, well, why can't we keep her in Wakanda? Nah, that's not good enough. I'm like, all right, well, what do you have? It's like, well, if we kill her, it'll just be, you know, she'll be dead. So yeah, I think in so many ways, I think the film set out to accomplish what it did. You know, obviously the thing that's missing is Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa. We were not going to get that no matter what they decided to do. And you know, we talked about sort of the intro in the beginning, and then there's another very quiet, somber reflection, homage to him very late in the film, which I thought was very nicely done. And, you know, just sort of reminds you, it's that last moment of like, yeah, so here's what we don't have anymore. Like, we've got a lot of good stuff. And, you know, this idea also that, you know, M'Baku's going to be king of Wakanda. You know, that Shuri's not interested in ruling. She's like, I'm just going to do my Black Panther. They basically set it up and they kind of explained it. They didn't actually show it, but I think really getting to see that dynamic, I think, will be very interesting. And I love the scene between the two of them where he explains that you know, that T'Challa made him promise that he would take care of her, you know. You know, where the MCU goes is a lot of different places, but where the world of Wakanda and Black Panther go after this, I mean, I'm very interested to see what it is and when it is. What do you think you'd most like to see, Khalil? I'll ask you first with, you know, with the next time we see really, you know, these characters, basically when we see Shuri again and, you know, also, you know, M'Baku and others, but really the next time we see Black Panther, what are you hoping to see from her?
That's an interesting question because I really haven't given that much thought. I've been so in the moment. I have thought
Yeah,
about,
sure.
oh, when is the next thing? I loved when we got Black Panther for the first time in Civil War. Like,
Yeah.
to me, he was the highlight of that movie. And through most of the MCU, I feel like outside of his standalone movie, we haven't really gotten a lot of time with Black Panther, like as a character. So it'd be great if we could, like, let's take Thor, right? Like, I love Thor. Well, I feel like we spent a lot of time with Thor.
Yeah.
A lot of time with Thor. I like him. No complaints, but I just wish I could say that about Black Panther. So as far as looking forward, if we could just have him pop up some more. The issue is I don't know where it makes sense for him to pop up, but
yeah, no. It's hard to. That's why it's hard to kind of guess where it's the same thing with Namor. It's like it's hard to
yeah,
know when we're going to see them again. But you know, hopefully, whomever the Avengers are in the future, I mean, a lot of them know her. That there are obviously she's somebody to call on. You know, just when she's not wearing the suit. You know, I could see Bruce Banner, you know, wanting to, you know, pick her brain for, you know, some crazy invention he's working on, which would probably, you know, go disastrously wrong and lead to a whole movie of hijinks, perhaps. I don't know. Phil, what do you think about what's next? Black Panther, MCU, just in general?
I'm excited for M'Baku. Like, I think there's definitely been a character shift overall from the first movie to this, and it's very subtle, and I can't quite put it to words, but because we don't always get that much screen time with him, but I think there is sort of a shift, and whereas before, let's say, he was much more combative, and his first kind of instinct, even in this movie, is to essentially go right against and like fortify their army and stuff like that. But I think he also understands the responsibility of being king, and so I think it's going to be a little bit more nuanced than perhaps he's been. And so I'm excited for that. I'm very interested in the young T'Challa, with the post-credit scene. I think that works on so many various levels, but from my understanding, the actress of Shuri was just kind of a nightmare to work with, and I think that was like in overall, like, sit down and shut up, because we got
and
on deck.
We've touched on before, she took a very strong anti-vaccine stance, which people are certainly entitled to their opinions on things. But when you're Disney, you don't really want people taking opinions that are even remotely controversial, And I mean, it seems like something that they don't want to have to deal with, but they've got her, they've got Evangeline Lilly, you've got people that are out there, that are essentially front and center Avengers characters, and you're like, could you be quiet? I mean, I know that we shouldn't, that we live in an age where people think that free speech is important, because it is, but we're giving you an awful lot of money, But
that's why we got the young T'Challa. That's why Disney was like, we gotta get her out of here. You get this movie, the big shit makes sense, and then you gotta go.
I mean, it's entirely possible. But finish your thought, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, listen, obviously I don't know her. I wasn't involved. And what she delivered on screen, I thought was fantastic. And I was able to separate, the two. But that final post-credit scene kind of reminded me of that. And also, too, I mean, beyond the sort of gossipy side of it, I think there's just a beauty to it of, the lineage continuing, because Shuri herself thought she was the last one, and she's not, now. She has a nephew, right? So yeah. I think from that, just the storytelling perspective, I thought that, and where it goes, I mean, I have no idea, but I've appreciated what Ryan Coogler's been able to do, and as I said, like, I think more than most, it is a standalone-ish movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about keeping doors open, and now that the mantle has been passed, it can certainly be passed again when it needs to. We have this Prince T'Challa, and if they want to figure out some reason why, actually 15 years passed in Wakanda when only 2 years passed in the real world, and now look how old he is. Or how about we don't explain it? He's just an adult now. Look, there's a lot of options. What do you think, Eric, as we look to the future for these characters, but also how they fit into the ever-expanding jigsaw puzzle of the MCU?
Or Christian, they could have done it like Mork and Mindy, when Mirth was born and he was Jonathan Winters, big guy, and they get smaller. I think they should have done that, and then they were all safe.
Jonathan Winters comes out of the gigantic egg.
One of the great moments in TV history. That aside,
by the way, we have focused on some of the worst storytelling in television history. The era of 8 Simple Rules with David Spade. Now we're talking about Jonathan Winters. Yeah, we talked about Patrick Duffy as I don't even remember what that show was called. I want to call it Aqualad, but it wasn't called that.
Not Sea-Lad. That was the other guy.
Yeah, but anyway, sorry. Back to your point.
Patrick Duffy aside. I think, Letitia Wright with her whole anti-vax stance. Remember what they did to Ed Norton, right? Ed Norton apparently didn't play nice in the sandbox, and not only did they just like have him leave, but remember Kevin Feige actually wrote that note that got published that was basically saying, we believe in people who can collaborate and believe in the spirit of working together. So I mean, they just like buried Ed Norton with
Yeah,
that.
which, by the way, why did you ever hire Ed Norton in the first place?
Yeah.
You didn't. What, this was news to you?
Right.
But yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like hiring, I don't know, Ezra Miller at this point, and being like, I don't know if he's in control of everything yet.
Yeah, well,
Um,
now you want to talk about a film that's going to have a problem marketing
oh,
itself.
that's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
But
They wish,
yeah.
DC wishes the biggest problem they had was Amber Heard. Anyway, sorry, back to you.
Well, I think, I mean, for one, they're doing the Wakanda TV show, right? So that feels like
Yeah.
a good solid place. And a million years ago, when Christian and my eyes first, met, it was when Kevin Feige spoke at NIFA, and he talked about like when they added Black Panther, it was partially because they were worried they could not renew Robert Downey's contract. So the idea of adding Black Panther to Civil War was sort of like a potential stopgap. They're like, at some point they wanted Black Panther, but they're like, well, just in case we can't get Iron Man back, let's hand the mantle over to him. And it's interesting because in doing that, eventually got us to Black Panther a little bit faster, maybe. But then what Black Panther did so well beyond just one character was the world, and really well cast from the get-go. So, I think they've set themselves up really well with the world of Wakanda, so that of all the sort of series, this one could really survive without its lead. As powerful a presence as Chadwick Boseman had, the truth is Cougar did such a good job with the building of Wakanda in Black Panther that it actually has given us several actors who we'd be thrilled to see in other series. So I think they have set themselves up well to kind of populate all over the MCU. I as mentioned, Winston Duke to me though feels like, of everyone they got right now, that's the guy who feels like he could kind of hold up that mantle. Because I don't know if Letitia Wright could, even without
I agree with you.
behind the scenes
I
stuff.
agree with you.
I think
He's the guy. He's the guy.
Yeah, I think if they do have her continue as Black Panther for a while, I think that's probably about right. I mean, this character that they've created, it doesn't feel like a monarch. It doesn't seem like a ruler. It's more like she can manage the goings on in a lab,
It's a
or
temporary situation.
yeah. So I agree. It'll be really interesting to see real world reasons, storytelling reasons, what they do next. But it's always interesting where we find ourselves at the end of an MCU movie, because we're like, okay, but what about the next thing?
Right. Now, Angela Bassett, by the way,
Yeah,
that's the one I was always hoping that they would maybe. I mean, I realize she's not young, but I mean, for one, I mean, her build, like she has kept that Tina Turner, build for decades now.
You gotta
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, look, you gotta learn how to duck and run from Ike, and God, that movie was like 30 years ago, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
I was just thinking about how long ago that was, because I was remembering they used to on SNL, they used to have Tim Meadows as Ike Turner, but it was like 70s Ike Turner. And he would always be like, I'm sorry, Kevin Nealon, because he'd always get angry at him. And God, that was so long ago. Yeah, I mean, tremendous career. They built this great character. One of the somewhere along the way, we got the insight that I think that even in the earliest incarnation of a second Black Panther, where it would have still featured T'Challa, she was going to die in it. That it was going to have a lot to do with it. So, and of course, what's love got to do with it? But we, of course, get to see. I think she's great in this movie. And, we only in passing mentioned, all the actresses in the Dora Milaje. I mean, fantastic as always. The fight scene on the bridge in Boston might be the best in the whole movie. And that's a one-on-one fight, So, yeah, I think that, no stone was left unturned, but in the best way. I think everyone was really well served for who was in this. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Angela Bassett, though, because she was fantastic. Ivan Soto asked a question before we go. Where did Shuri's incredible fighting skills come from? It's not a bad question, because she got the strength, and then we didn't get the training montage like we usually get in a lot of films.
I'm glad he didn't.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because your 2 hour and 41 minutes becomes a 3 hour and 1 minute movie if we it's like, and now you need to train and learn to fight. Her brother was the Black Panther, and she probably needed to be prepared to be in situations where she'd have to defend herself. So it's all right. It's a completely valid question, but it's all right. Oh no, Daniel Drew was the one actually. He said that the Midnight Angel suits that the Dora Milaje got were great, and they did look good, and apparently comic book accurate as well. In any case, it's been great talking again about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. And if you're enjoying this conversation, next week in our usual spot, it will be Thanksgiving, but we'll have recorded an episode where I believe our friend Nate Miller will have his voice back by then. And our pal Katie El Sassy Pants will be with us. And but if you want another live show, that's right, we've got 4. Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific. We'll be doing an episode live with myself, my pal Flobo Boyce from AfterBuzz TV, Eric Nagel from It's Eric Nagel, and David Brody, who has been on this show, and he was a part of the Elvis Duran show for almost 30 years. So the 4 of us are going to be speaking about it live Monday at 9 p.m., 6 p.m. Central. So, and then after that, I think we'll be done talking about Black Panther. We'll give you 4 hours, but not 4 hours and 23 minutes. That would be a Zack Snyder movie, and we're not equipped for that. But then we got to start talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special anyway, which I'm expecting it to be my second favorite holiday special, only to the Star Wars holiday special. And yes, he is Groot. But so that's all the time we have for this episode. But if you would like to keep in touch with all of our panelists, Khalil, I know you're on social media at Khalil Abobo, and you're also going to be doing a panel with Phil Svitek at LA Comic-Con. Is that not correct?
That's
That is
true.
correct.
Very excited.
December 3rd at noon in room 405. We'll be teaching filmmakers how to make a feature film for cheap, without sacrificing ambition.
Interestingly enough, on Saturday, December 3rd at LA Comic-Con, myself, Eric Connor, and hopefully Nate Miller's got his voice back, and Jeff Williams Jr. will be doing a live episode of the Geekscape Book Club. I think that's in room 406, so not far. They can go to your panel. Yeah, they can go to your panel, have a little snack, and then come on over to ours. We'll be talking about a Black Panther story called Sturm and Drang, which I chose because it is about an invasion of Wakanda from Atlantis. So it seemed timely, even though the story is from 2001. So you'll be able to find myself and Eric there, along with others. Phil, if people want to find you on social media, how do they do that?
Just my name, at Phil Svitek, pretty much everywhere. All the TikToks, the Twitters, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, all that.
And one of these days, I think we should just surprise people and just go live with a South Park show. Maybe the next Paramount Plus special, because it's been too long since we've talked about it. Eric Connor, sorry, what was that, Phil?
I said it truly has, and I've been rewatching some old episodes, and they hold up. They hold up.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric Connor, where can people find you?
Not on TikTok because I'm old, but everywhere else you can find me. Count Eric Connor over on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook. Eric Adam Connor, that's me. And we could play there, and I look forward to seeing your panel at Comic-Con.
And your film Other Voices is on Amazon Prime, correct?
It's hanging out on Amazon Prime, and I think it's free with Amazon Prime right now. So you can save some money if you quick. It could go back to the incredibly expensive $5 rental price,
The only way you could get me to watch it, although I still haven't, is the idea of wait, I don't have to pay extra. No, I'm sure it's...
I mean, every time between you and Michael Shirley, the way you guys advertise the documentary...
Right. To be fair, Michael Shirley watched a different movie called Other Voices, and he was very confused.
And he still blamed me for that one, which I thought was especially kind.
Which I usually then turn it around to blame you for the Doors album without Jim Morrison called Other Voices. because what we always wanted was to hear Ray Manzarek sing. In any case, I am Christian Bladt. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. Please subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, BLADTCAST. You'll get this show live, among with a variety of others. And of course, the Blackcast is found wherever you find your podcasts, BLADTCAST. That's all the time we have for now, but we'll see you next time on the Blackcast. And as the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior!